Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Welcome in the Sala F. I welcome you in the name of the University of Applied Arts, Vienna, here at Sala F. All the world's future, this is a general theme of this year's Biennale, and one of the main issues of our presence and also of our future will be the increasing economization, so to say, of all issues of our lives, including arts. So in the following panel discussion, Art, Form and Values, we want to discuss the different understandings of values of art. And the question will be, the main question will be, who or what defines the value of art and for which purpose? Our discussion is accompanied by a video installation which will be presented to you by Rector Bast in a second. And this discussion was initiated and hosted by the president of the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, Mr. Gerald Bast. Mr. Bast has been collecting a lot of experiences during the last years in educational and art questions on an European and on an international and Austrian level. As, for example, as member of the representative board of LEA, European League of Institutes of the Arts. So welcome with me, Rector Bast.
Yes, good afternoon. It's wonderful that so many people found their way to this venue. Just a few words why we do that. We, that is the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. The reason why we do that now for the second time, panel discussion with high-ranking international guests here in Venice at the Biennale, is that the University of Applied Arts is the host of the Austrian Biennale archive, meaning all the Austrian contributions to Venice Biennale since the beginning of this wonderful event of the arts. This is an archive in progress, will be open to the public very soon. It will be a digital archive for researchers, for artists, curators, and so on. So this is the background. More important even is to be present here as an internationally bounded university, which is at the point of the time, or at least we wish to be that. I think the topic we choose for this discussion is quite in time and fitting to the general topic. Also, we are on a special place, just 50 meters away from the reading of Karl Marx's Capital, and maybe on the other side also 50 meters from the luxury yachts of all the international art collectors who already bought what they can buy here, what I heard. So this is the environment we are discussing, and this also gives us the ground for what we are discussing. Is there any value except the economic value of the arts? Can art be explained the way maybe Karl Marx tried to explain work? Is art kind of a piece of product, or is art more than that, going in the direction of a civilizatory process? And what does this all mean, giving the arts a place in the center of a society? So I give back now the mic to Renata Schmidtkunz, who will moderate this discussion, a journalist for almost 25 years in television and radio. She is holder of several awards in publication, in making radio and TV productions. And I also want to draw your attention on this video installation from a graduate from the University of Applied Arts, a graduate from Fine Arts Photography. It's work done by Sarah PRUCHA, supported by TIMOTHEUS TOMICEK, and it's called Surgical Precision, as I think also quite good fitting to what is happening right now in our world, and maybe a way how the art could react on what we are realizing and maybe some are suffering from. Thank you for coming, and I wish you and to wish us a very interesting and inspiring discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bast. So before I'm gonna introduce to you the panel members, I just was asked to tell you who got the awards of this year Golden Lion. If you want to know, are you interested in that? So I will tell you. The best artist is the US conceptual artist Adrian Piper. Yes. The best contribution of a country comes from Armenia, which I think is amazing. We will see what they did. And the best life award went to the sculpture from Ghana, El Anatsui. These are the awards for this year. So now I want to present to you the panel in alphabetic order, and I don't want to miss to say that I'm very happy that there are so many young people coming to our discussion. Thank you for coming, to all of you. I introduce to you Helmut Draxler, who is here on my right side. He's an art theorist and a professor at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, also living in Berlin. Welcome. Isabelle Graw, she's an art critic, art theorist, and she's the editor of Texte zur Kunst, which is published in Berlin. Welcome. Rene Green, artist and professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, in the program ACT, which means Program in Art, Culture and Technology. Welcome. Shaheen Merali, he's a writer and a curator living in London. From 2003 to 2008, he was head of department Exhibition, Film and New Media in Haus der Kulturen der Welt, Berlin. So he has also a lot of international experience, and he doesn't speak German, by the way. Eva MARIA STADLER, she's head of Art and Knowledge Transfer at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. Welcome. Nice that you all came over. We said that we're going to have a discussion altogether 1.5 hours, but after approximately 45 minutes, we want to open our discussion to you, to the audience, and you can contribute your questions or comments. But for the first, let's say, 40 or 45 minutes, we want to first put all the positions on the table and discuss them. So the first round I want to make or to ask you is how, which is a very simple sounding question, but I think it's quite difficult to answer. How do we define value of art in relation, or the value in relation to art? So how do these two things belong together, art and value, and who defines it? And maybe you want to start, Rene, in also presenting your...
Actually, no, I'm still thinking, just taking in the question.
Okay,
yeah.
So take your time.
Thank
and Isabelle, you were writing a very wonderful article about Marx and art of laborers, and you tried to apply it to art. So maybe you start to answer this question?
Well, maybe I've actually recently... Do I have to push something?
No, it's
here?
okay. Just talk and we will regulate that.
Hi. First of all, thanks for inviting me to Venice during the biennial. Yeah, I think that if we talk about values during this discussion, we might want to specify what we mean. Because value in relation to art, there are of course many types of values in relation to art, and I've been thinking about this a lot in my own theoretical work. So on the one hand, there's what can be called the symbolic value of art, which is, you know, founded very differently and consists of very different things than the market value of art. Then there's what Walter Benjamin called the exhibition value of art, which is again something else. And then there is the commodity value, the Warenwert, a Marxian concept I used in relation to art. And all these different types of value function differently and are also based on different foundations. For instance, you know, one could say, I think, that the artwork is split between, on the one hand, its symbolic value and its market value. Its symbolic value consisting of all the kind of symbolic meaning that has been ascribed to it, on the one hand, and also consisting of the symbolic worth of art. Art, since the 18th century, is a kind of symbolically meaningful category, and all kinds of, you know, values have been associated with art, such as the purposelessness of art, it having a kind of truth function. All these ascriptions that date, you know, from the 18th century, I still inform our notion of modern art and kind of, you know, underlie its symbolic value. So there's the symbolic value. On the other hand, there's the market value, which is basically expressed by its price. So, you know, theoreticians like Pierre Bourdieu always assumed that there's an absolute polarity between art's symbolic value and its market value. He basically suggested that an artwork that has a lot of symbolic value has this symbolic value precisely because it has no market value. And his kind of example for that was the literary world in the late 19th century, where artworks that were market successful, authors that were market successful, were considered suspicious, were considered of having no symbolic worth. And I would argue that things have, due to the economization of the art world that you mentioned, I would refer to a kind of structural change of the art world that happened in the last 20 to 30 years. I think the relationship between symbolic and market value has changed a lot. And nowadays we find a situation where there is no absolute polarity between them anymore. But this doesn't mean they are one and the same thing. But we do find artworks who have market value without having symbolic value, say artworks that circulate successfully in the auction sphere and that no critic or art historian would ever write about and think about as worth anything. But then we also have works of art that possess a lot of symbolic value without having market value. And of course, symbolic value also can get transformed into market value. Like if an artwork is shown in an exhibition like the Venice Biennale, this generates symbolic value that can be transferred into market value. And this process can be very fast, but it doesn't have to. So I think there's a dialectical relationship between market and symbolic value that we might want to think about. And as a last point, what I call the Warenwert, the commodity value of art, is again a different type of value, which consists of labor, which consists of the amount of labor that has been invested into the artwork. I won't elaborate now because this is theoretically very complicated, but this is where we can't do without Marx. And I feel a bit weird, thinking about commodity value, Warenwert, by referring to Marx in a context where we have, a kind of radical chic type demonstration of the Kapital reading right next to us. And I think there are ways and ways of referring to Marx, but it's my firm conviction that if we want to think about commodity value, we need Marx. We can't do without him, because he's the one who theorized commodity value, Warenwert, as labor in its congealed form. And here we have this term form as well, because for Marx, value is always objectified. It needs to come it comes in the shape of an object. So I mean, I think his theoretical propositions, even though that he didn't relate his value reflections to art, but I think it's useful to refer to him if we want to think about the commodity value, which is the type of value art has once it circulates as a commodity. And I believe that it circulates as a commodity from the get-go. If an artist has a studio visit, say, this is when artworks circulate as commodities. And yes, so sorry if this is a bit theoretical.
Yes, no, they're very fine to get into this very complicated issue. I think we have to make a lot of differentiation. And you sent us, in preparation for this discussion, Mr. Draxler, you sent us a very nice paper giving 5 criteria, so to say, how to measure value of an art object. And as Mrs. Graw said before, that there is a historical shift of understanding the value of an art object. Maybe it's helpful for us that you would share these criteria that you put on a paper with us.
I think maybe I would focus first of all on this first of those 5 criteria, and that concerns value itself as something which is what is typical for modern societies, that value is lacking, that value is not here, and that value cannot be defined in a very strict sense. I think this is really very crucial for any kind of...
Can you say that again? Value cannot be...
Value cannot be defined. Value is not
That's
there.
A very important sentence.
Value is absent. That's the crucial idea, and that was already Niklas Luhmann's point, the German sociologist in the 1980s, saying that the appearance of value in contemporary life is the complaint about its absence. So it's never there. It cannot be there because in bourgeois societies there is no instance who would decide definitely about the value of the value. That is only possible in social situations nowadays we would all, or most of us, consider as fanatist. So the Islamic State is a value system. Maybe the Iranian Republic has a value system, but those typical modern bourgeois Western types of society, which are almost global nowadays, they are based on this fundamental lack of values. And I think this is really important to understand for value, because only then we can introduce the question of how art relates to this lack of value, and how art is considered since 18th century or whenever as a kind of fulfillment of that lack. That it is an idea which gives us some hints or some promise. It's always a promise. That art will, heal that lack in one way or another. And of course it doesn't do it because it's always contested. There's no way to overcome that lack. There's always you like one artwork and I like another one.
So you're basically saying that in the art field we are living in a post-value period. That's what you're saying? Or are we living in general in a post-value period?
No, I would not say post-value, because it's the typical modern form how value appears as being, a lack, as being absent. So there is no time of a value which is given because the Pope or a prince is guaranteeing that kind of value. So the absence is fundamental, and I think that's what we are, and that's what we are struggling about. And the whole relationship comes up then in terms of art, is how art, how the value of art could be guaranteed by some kind of institutions or by the market.
May I intervene there? If you say there is value cannot be defined and there is no actual value in combination with the arts, why then, or what is it, why, for example, religious fundamentalists destroy pieces of art as a demonstration for destroying not these pieces of the art, because the real pieces they sold on the art market, just as a demonstration for destroying something like value? what does this mean?
Just a short answer.
And what does
then
it
Mrs.
mean
Stadler?
that they destroyed ancient pieces of art, which were and still are combined with kind of a value?
They are just representations of what is considered valuable in the Western world. Of course, that is an attack on that, but that doesn't mean that this is real value within the Western capitalist kind of societies. It's just a kind of promise of a value, and that is hit very successfully in those kinds of attacks.
But does that mean, just to understand just to understand so that we can go on, does it mean that these old artifacts of art that had been destroyed have no value?
Yeah, they used to have their values within their societies in multiple
Within
ways.
Societies, okay.
But now the modern kind of value is that kind of, that it is a promise as a value in an imaginary museum or whatever you could call it.
Okay.
But it's not a value in itself.
Just to make it
That's
understandable. Yeah, Mrs. Stadler and then Shaheen.
And maybe just to add something
Sorry,
to...
I had Mrs. Stadler on the list. I'm sorry. Mrs. Stadler and then Shaheen and then you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe what I want to add to this argument that values are lacking is maybe we can think about the argument of Dirk Becker, who says the call for values is extremely high when the social reliability to values is very low. So what he is maybe saying with his is that the values cannot they are absent, but we can understand them as implicit, that they're implicit bounded to societies. And in this way, I would not make such a difference between like Western the understanding of values and other areas of the world, because this kind of implicit power is something which opens up a field of negotiation and where we have to think about or work out what value can be. And concerning the art world, maybe we can come back to this argument. I would say that then it is very important that we think about that what happens in the institutions.
Okay, maybe we can go there further later. Now, Shaheen.
All right, so it's kind of strange just to jump straight into Islamic fundamentalism when we start talking about the notion of value. And it's strange because in a strange way, we are preoccupied with what has been destroyed rather than what has been made in the destruction of something else, which is what Derrida talked about. Destruction was when something is brought down and something else comes about. So the notion of destruction or deconstruction is about the idea of something disappearing, but in the process of it disappearing, something else appears. It's actually a process where what is happening in that part of the world is that there is a kind of a haunting, a feeling that these relics, which we might think as valuable, could impose a systematic ideological constraint on who they are and how they feel about the world and their place in the world. So all values, in a sense, are hallucinatory, are fantastical, are imaginary, and are constructed within the site of culture. And we have to take on board that we're talking about differences and cultures as if they all seem to have the same line of thinking, and they don't. And just because certain people have a different way of looking at the notion of a space or an object or the philosophy contained within that production or that labor market or its inscription, they might want to refer back to that haunting. They might refer back to the values it holds, and how do they then come to terms with that values? Do they re-represent it, preserve it, or destroy it? A lot of the work here, which is not bought, cannot be shipped back, especially to very far countries, and will be destroyed. So literally, we are in a site of destruction as we are in the site of production.
Mrs. Graw.
Oh, I just wanted to add one thought to what Helmut said about value always lacking. I think that maybe we have to differentiate between, on the one hand, artworks being stretched between different value poles, like symbolic and market value. And on the other hand, we have to acknowledge that no artwork is valuable as such, because value is, and Marx has shown this as well, value is relational, value is metonymic. Value basically appears in the relation between one commodity to the other commodity. Mm-hmm. So it is always elsewhere. We can't pin it down. We don't find it in the artwork, and therefore this notion of an intrinsic value, so dear to the commercial art market. Many auctioneers, Tobias Meyer, the ex-Christie's auctioneer, spoke about this, how an artwork, like I think his example was a Rothko, is a masterpiece that stands the test of time and will also stand the scrutiny of the global collector and is valuable as such and has an intrinsic value. That's a fantasy. And Marx clearly said that in the beginning of the Capital. He said the notion of intrinsic value is a contradictio in adjecto. And it's because of this relational nature of value, it is actually built on sand, that it is constantly negotiated. That it is because it is built on sand that the conversation about it never stops and never ends. Because this is why, for instance, dinners are so important after art exhibitions. Why is there this weird convention of the dinner? Because this is also a site where value is, metaphorically at least, negotiated. And we need that because the value is not in the thing, which we can't pin it down.
Okay, so before we go to discuss now the question if every value is fantastic, what do we have to talk about? I want to introduce Rene again, because I have been missing you now. So please come over with your...
Okay, a pleasure. Thank you, Helmut, also for the invitation to come here. I am the only artist on the panel. I just wanted to point that out. And I also am the only person who's come from the United States here. And so that's another factor. But in this conversation about value, I've been thinking about it in terms of the 3 points together, art, form, and values, because I wanted to think of, I've been putting that, thinking about these each day, actually, since the invitation, because I was trying to understand or trying to imagine it from my perspective. In relation to how can it be possible to think about it. I think that I'm happy to have heard so far from everyone on the panel, and I think it's very helpful, which is why I did not want to go first, to hear more of an introduction about the different forms, which I think are important to stress, the exchange dimension and also the illusory aspect, that there's no such thing as intrinsic value, and that the way in which it functions has a number of different facets. I actually, because I don't intend to represent an expert perspective on this, I'm not a sociologist, nor am I an anthropologist, but I wanted to refer to Arun Appadurai, who describes it quite interestingly, but in relation to what we've heard so far. Actually. And the thing is that in terms of thinking about value, I'd like to introduce the possibility also of thinking about value in relation to a life. And so this is not to think about the value as solely in relationship to an object or thing, but to also imagine how it could be conceived of in relationship to a living process. And so I'm just putting that on the table. I have more things I'd like to say about it, but I think, I want to continue and see where this is going.
But maybe you can explain what you exactly mean by saying value in relationship to liveness.
I'm talking about, actually, I'd like to focus my thoughts on the duration of a life of an artist, for example, because, if we actually dissect what does take place in terms of the production, and we've also mentioned about the labor, and we can also talk about the form and the art. There's someone who does produce it, in addition to the structure of an institutional presentation such as this. And so those would be also the artists. And that's the kind of overlooked part, I think, many times in the discussion. And I have something very specific in mind in terms of thinking about that. I'm thinking about a few different artists, and I'm also thinking about the time period. If you think about the lifetime, the ways that values shift during the lifetime. And so I'm actually thinking about someone like Joan Jonas, whose work you can see here, and the different phases of what is valued, what's not valued, how that comes in and out of the perception of a public, and also how it's mediatized as well. And I'm also thinking about Jonna Comfra, from Smoking Dogs Films. Also, you can see here an example of that work. And the other person I want to think about, and actually have something a bit longer that I'd like to say, is Ankawara, who recently died. And I do have something that I want to present, focusing specifically on his solutions for living.
So I just want to sum up the first round, so to say. So bring it all together and recall what we said. We said that there are different values of types of value: market value, symbolic value, exhibition value, handcrafted value, time life value. So we have different types of value, which were now mentioned. Symbolic value. We had a philosophical dimension of value, and. We would also say, this was you, that value cannot be defined. Value is something fantastical. So let me get to the next step. Let me ask you, if a value is fantastical, what do we have to talk about? Do we have to talk about social relationships? Do we have to talk about the brutal market that pushes artists from the beginning of their career on into this kind of economic way? Yeah, you have to make money, you have to be successful, we want to sell you. Or do we have to talk about politics and about public that makes art possible or not possible, that creates spaces of freedom where art can emerge? Yeah. So what would you propose, what we have to talk about, Mr. Draxler?
I would, in terms of art, I would be, relaxed. I don't see any
You
need,
would be relaxed?
Yeah, to defend it. Or,
Wonderful.
it's happening anyhow. It's such a big promise of, sense and production of sense and meaning. And there's no need to worry about art. Yeah, it's just happening, And so I think there's no, from my perspective, there's really no need to make we have to do something in the name of art, that art will thrive or things like that. That's absolutely not necessary. It's thriving anyhow. It's one of the most successful signifiers in the world. So all those, theories of the end of art or, after art and things like that are for me, really missing completely the point. Yeah, just the fact that we are sitting here and talking, in this context is just one of the, main signifiers of that, enormous value in a certain way, but in my understanding is a sort of not really a substitute value, but a substitute for that lack, which is so fundamental. And what we can discuss then is just what the different spheres of value, how they interfere into that. So how is the capital value, economic value, social values? What's different? We put you in different types of capital or value, which are at place. This is the one side, and the other side is of course then the practical side, how we can deal with it, and what does it mean in terms of the history of modern art and avant-garde art, that the avant-garde always understood itself as breaking this autonomous value of art and creating some kind of other value in a certain way. And so the post-avant-garde situation is always confronted with this possibility or need to reflect what if we don't have an intrinsic value, yeah? But that we also don't believe in this pure abstractness of outer space, of a pure transgression. Yeah? How can we define value in terms of relative, of relativity, of relative values, relative autonomy, as Bourdieu calls it, and what could that mean?
Okay, so
And
let's
maybe,
go there. Yeah.
and maybe it's also important not to think about artists as victims, as kind of you seem to suggest, the poor artists who are pushed by the market. I think that
I suggest that.
a little bit. I mean that artists are kind of pressured. I think you said. I don't know the exact wording, but I just think that maybe we have to realize that the whole idea of artistic freedom or autonomy was a kind of very productive illusion from the get-go, and relative from the get-go. And even an artist, say like Duchamp, on the one hand, forced his own production rhythm onto the market by, for instance, working for 20 years on the large glass, which is precisely not what the art market wants artists to do. And on the other hand, he worked, as someone who sold Brancusis at auction houses and operated as an advisor for Katrin Dreyer. So there is this interesting double life, to come back to the life metaphor that we find in Duchamp and many artists who deal with this relative autonomy, with this kind of highly negotiated freedom in a way that they have kind of double life, so to speak. And I was also thinking when Helmut mentioned the different value spheres that we could discuss, of course, evidently one value sphere we could discuss is criticism. Criticism is a value in itself, as we can see very well in this exhibition, and criticism generates value as well. It's a value-generating producer. You could on the one hand say criticism is therefore very powerful, but in the same time, in certain segments of the art world, it's totally without power. Say in the auction sphere, no collector would consult a critic before buying Jeff Koons. He would not read an essay before making that decision. So criticism at certain points, in certain segments or sphere, is without power, and in other spheres it's very powerful. This is again a kind of double dialectical situation. So that's something we could talk about. And my last point would be to come back to what you said about life. I thought that was a very interesting point, because if we think about value philosophically, maybe with the help of Marx, we will come to the conclusion that what value, if value consists of something, it is the lived labor of the artist, or what is imagined to be his lived labor or her lived labor. And I love a quote by the painter James Whistler in that respect, who was asked once, why do you take such high prices for works that you only executed in a couple of hours? And he said, I take this price for the labor of a lifetime. So it's again, the lifetime labor that is metaphorically, and I underline that it's of course not really there. It's not in the artwork, but the artwork is able to suggest that you can get a grasp on that lived labor. And of course artists also, actually did kind of put lifetime in their works. So there is a certain amount of truth to that. We could talk about that as well.
I wrote it down.
I've got a response, actually.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
And this is a kind of follow-up. It's in relationship to what Isabelle was just saying, but also to something that Helmut was saying earlier about the lack. And that art, you had said, I don't know, maybe you can correct me if I paraphrasing you, but it was sort of like the promise of art to heal a lack. And I would say that anything that would be valued would be something that you could imagine to be a kind of stand-in for a lack, or that it could be something that it could be projected onto in some way to supplement what's felt as in life to be a lack. And so, I mean, what I wanted to do, and this is something, it's specific, but I'd like to, if you give me permission to do it, it's related to this idea of the art life dimension and what would be lived. And so Onkuara is my example, and I just like to read this. This is I have to warn you, 7 minutes and 7.5 minutes long.
Wow. Let's have,
so I need to get your permission first before delving into it.
And it's a quote by Onkuara?
No, it's something I wrote in relationship to studying one Onkuara work. And the reason that I bring it up in part in this particular context is also because we are surrounded by many works. And what would it mean to have an encounter even with one? And then what is it that can be extracted from that possibility? And then this is as you're aware probably, this is Onkuara produces date paintings. This is one of the date paintings, and so the date paintings actually open up other dimensions that I think cross art, life, politics, and value. And so that's I can read it later.
I would hand over this decision to Mr. Bast, because 7 minutes reading is not in my competition, I'm sorry.
And it doesn't have to be now. I'm just putting it on the
Can
table.
you maybe give us, can you give us, would you decide about that?
We do that in the closing round.
Okay, the audience says read.
What
I agree.
I really feel now is that the discussion is running like, okay, we have a system of the arts, it is like it is, it produces values or maybe not. We can distinguish between economic values and social values. But what I feel is that this podium, everyone says, okay, it is how it is and everything is okay.
No. This is a total misunderstanding.
Let's take it to that. My question is it really okay that the main, of course, art is producing value, but is it okay that the real visible value, and we never had so many pieces of arts in a society like we have it now, and art was never so visible in our societies like it is now. But the main visibility is tuned to economic value. And what does it mean? That there is almost no impact of the arts in the society except producing economic value. Is this the system of our societies? We have it, and we have to accept that, and we have to surrender as people coming from the system of the arts? Or is there something to do above that?
So now we have, first we have to decide if we want to have the reading of Rene Green. And my question would be, could you make like a shortcut of it, like make a conclusion, or is it?
But you know what?
Or is it, no, let me ask you, or is it the reading of the text itself that you want, with which you want to show us what you mean?
I think that with an artwork, there are no shortcuts. It's the form itself.
That's why I was
asking. So it actually is the 7.5 minutes because it is the form of it itself. And I think that is what it is.
Okay, I can tell you now that we have another 10 minutes for our discussion. So 10 minutes compared to 7 minutes reading. For me, it's okay. If you agree,
let's do it we have some points, and I think we are really on halfway of clarifying some of the crucial issues which are at stake in terms of value. That's why I would suggest, I like the idea of interruption and artistic interruption of debate. So, but we should try to at least in one more round to focus on this problems of value, and maybe take a soften down your intervention as a break towards discussion towards the audience.
Okay, so let me introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Rene Green. She's going to read a text for us. Please go ahead.
You want me to do it now?
Yes.
I thought you wanted to cut the last point.
No,
okay.
that was not my suggestion. My suggestion was we continue.
Okay, all right, so I'll read it.
I suggested that. I am the moderator.
All right,
That's
all
what
right.
I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, but I am the moderator. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, let's go.
I will do it. Okay, it's called Ankawara's Solutions to Living. Via recognizable processes such as I got up, I met, I went, I read, and systems, counting, dating, days of the week, named in Esperanto, and various languages depending on where he spent the first day of a given month, Ankawara hit upon a perfect method for conveying the movements of a global soul. The time was around 1966. The chosen framework of what is perhaps his most recognizable body of work, his two-day series of date paintings denoting the month, date, and year, and produced continually for an indeterminate time, along with a newspaper clipping from whatever newspaper he read that day, and a box that fit both the newspaper clipping and the painting, appears to be a simple framework, yet it is open enough for myriad projections. We as viewers always encounter this work after the date has passed. In this case, we're looking at a small date painting with a simple white sans serif type on a black ground. It is accompanied by a box with a newspaper clipping. The painting fits inside the box. The box is labeled by the date as well. There are other aspects to this process. I'll come back to this. At whatever point in time one encounters one of Ankawara's date paintings, it is possible to imagine a form of relation and of distance. You can also imagine a day in the life of Ankawara, at least what he allows us to know, the time that elapsed during the designated 24-hour period called a day, and how he spent some hours of it, maybe 8, maybe 12, making the painting you see. You may also recall the processes I mentioned earlier. He did meet people and kept notebooks listing who, where, and the date. He sent people postcards and telegrams that stated that he was still alive. He read the newspapers that we find clippings of in his boxes. The paintings and the processes surrounding them somehow resemble the process of keeping a journal that is both public and private. They represent the trace of Ankawara's own form of paying attention, as well as call our attention as viewers to the date we read in the painting. Imagine painting a date painting with precision, preparing the box, reading the newspaper, making a selection from the mass of news, and cutting it to fit neatly into the box. Ankawara did keep journals that are related to the date paintings. In these, he lists, via his own coding system, the size, color, and the date, as well as subtitles for the paintings, along with photos of his working locations. The subtitles continue, but their contents shifted after 1972. I'll come back to this. One can think of Ankawara's activities and the work he produces as a move back and forth from what can be imagined as solipsism, a private activity, to communality, meeting people, walking through cities, reading about news events to engage the public realm. I find it amusing to imagine receiving a postcard from him with his succinct message, "I got up at blank," indicating that he's still making the effort, still alive. Now it seems rare to receive postcards, especially from anyone you might actually know. Having something which has visibly passed from another person to you, from one place to another, something to touch. Try to imagine the past before email and social networks. How do we value contact or being remembered by a single person? There is no notebook of processes labeled "I said" or "I wrote," possibly because he was enacting these actions. There are references to these actions in his earlier subtitles until 1973. I like imagining Ankawara as a character in Kurt Vonnegut's novel, Timequake. In the novel, time reverses to be repeated. February 2001 becomes February 1991. All inhabitants of Earth must relive exactly what they lived through the first time they lived through the decade. I can imagine Onkawara as hardly being affected, in that his approach to living seems quite consistent. A soothing solution, somehow, knowing that when you get up in the morning you can paint figures on a monochrome and what seems like repetition, although it isn't really repetition as each moment is different. What is life, anyway? A series of repetitions, but not exactly? The traditional art and life divide is bridged by his decision to literally link what he makes with what he lives. In a photo that documents his working space, traces of living, a pack of cigarettes, and acrylic paint tubes are visible. The work here, March 16, 1993, is a gift by Onkawara and his wife, Hiroko, to the San Francisco Museum of Art in memory of John Caldwell. Upon closer viewing of the box, you can note that the newspaper clipping comes from the obituary page. It includes, among others, the obituary of John Caldwell, who was a curator of painting and sculpture at SF MoMA from 1989 until 1993. The newspaper is cut to fit the box, so the obituaries of all that appear on this page are partly cut. The specific gift suggests a form of relation to Caldwell that shows respect and that can resuscitate the memory of those who knew Caldwell, as well as those who encounter a reference to him for a first time here. This, in turn, can set off a chain of thoughts. How much time has passed since this painting was made and since Caldwell died? Isn't it interesting that Caldwell had an interest in collecting art that involved forms of appropriation, and now even his obituary is appropriated as a piece of art in the collection of the museum in which he worked? A trace remains to be interpreted in various ways, and there is the date and our own relationship to it, or our memory or lack of memory of it. Through time, Onkawara's work can take on a profound significance if we fully contemplate the various kinds of relation it suggests. Its continuous yet open forms that are also specific still allow space to speculate, wonder, and remember solipsistically and communally on the fact that while seeing this painting on this day, we are still alive. This brings me to my conclusion. I will read subtitles from Onkawara's work until the time runs out. July 1967, New York. July 4th, 1967, Independence Day. July 5th, 1967, North Korean regulars killed a South Korean soldier and wounded 12 others south of the demilitarized zone today. July 8th, 1967, hip, hippie, hooray. July 10th, 1967, I have a dull pain in my eyes. July 12th, 1967, Negro taxi driver John W. Smith was stopped by two patrolmen at 9:45 tonight in Newark. July 13th, 1967, Newark. July 14th, 1967, Newark. July 15th, 1967, Newark. July 16th, 1967, Newark. July 17th, 1967, Newark. July 18th, 1967, mostly fair and warm.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay, does somebody want to refer to what we heard?
No, I think what we experience and not what we hear is that what is a classical conflict between, what the art system is about, between artists and critics, and what in, different theories is described, that there is no way. The dealer always wants to compare the artwork, with this Dirk Becker, Luhmann argument, but the artist insists, and the audience insists on the immediacy of the value, which is produced by the act itself. And there is no decision in that, and that's why the conservative system theoreticians say we can only sit up there and watch, so we are only, observers to the whole thing which is going on here, and that we are not part of, and super interesting thing, of course, would be, is there another possibility of just participating in a system and performing it in that kind of, difference between our positions, between artists and theorists or whatever. Yeah? And I think that is the crucial point in a way. Yeah? Is there another perspective possible in which we not only, perform the system, but that we address it at least in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. I just want to come back to what Mr. Bast said to come to our last round, I would say, like he would, yes, the second, that we do as if everything was okay and nothing is okay. That's what I understood from what you said. That we do as if the art is like this and the art market is like this and there's nothing to intervene and there's nothing to do about. So
and
let's talk.
We're just observers.
Pardon me?
And we all are just observers, including the artists.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the question. So,
which artist?
Shaheen,
which
right,
artist? The Gulf protest yesterday. I think there were some interventions that were. I forgot to mention, sort of like Pace to Guggenheim Museum. That was an event that was taking place at the Guggenheim Foundation yesterday, and so I think the artists were actually active. And participating and intervening, attempting that. Not to say that anything is actually what would be called successful, but I heard that there were some things that happened that changed the way, the standard procedures that stopped something for a while.
Okay. Shaheen.
But where is the art impacting society, except, for example, in Istanbul, except, for example, in Hong Kong, except in Cairo, or except impacting the bank accounts of the people who are having their yachts just 50 meters away from us. Mm-hmm. Where is it?
I think the term
impact... Okay, I have a list here. Now it's Shaheen, and then it's you, and it's Mr. Stadler, who has been waiting for a long time.
Thank you very much, Rene, but I still remain sort of doubtful about what was, in a sense, aesthetic and geopolitical knowledge that again comes from the US, which in a sense creates a lack of understanding of a wider development, because things which have come from the West have, in a sense, created a lack of flow of influences which we encounter, roles which are being played, developments which have been happened, because we are not this is not talked about very openly. So as much as there was an intervention at the Guggenheim and its role in Abu Dhabi, there was also an intervention from Ukraine artists in the Russian pavilion, in the US pavilion, in the Israeli pavilion, which in a sense slightly remains off skew, because we tend to be filtering always through certain specific ideas of how the artwork is built and what is important. And the importance that's given to certain types of knowledge and lives rather than other lives, which also have their own historical condition. They also have the sense of movement. They also have a sense of understanding of the world and the structures of logic, historical time, the notion of a pace of development or the lack of development. And I think we should open up the field to a kind of larger discursive network of what is going on in a globalized field, rather than just always constructing it out of the Western notion. And we are here full of a lot of pavilions which are not necessarily incredibly successful in speaking about it, but at least attempts are being made to talk about encounters within an art world which is ideologically structured, it is prejudicial in many ways, and it is also has its own logic of starting and stopping and producing kind of breaks in discussions and discourses around the world. So we need to sort of kind of rethink the frame which we're using here, the frame of modernity, modernization, the impacts of American discourses on the rest of the world, the invention of what is value, philosophy, historically sound ideas which have emerged from all of that, and to think much more openly now. I hope that the panel can do that, because I think it's going to be absolutely important for us to experience it with a wider filter than the filter which we're using at the
Okay,
moment.
Shaheen, can I ask you then to start with that? And can I ask you...
I just did.
Yeah, but go
I would
deeper
I would like to see if there are companions on board who also believe that things have changed. And I like the form of attention that Rene brought to us, which I think is very, very well said, done. What I feel is that we started with the notion of fear. There was a kind of, and there's a lot of work, not only here, but in the world about the notion of fear, in the way it's constructed. But that fear is not just one constructed out of a sense of forming a casual narrative. It's a memory which we've been devolved with, not only of art, but of our lives. And there is a kind of transformative intention in a lot of the works, not only here, but everywhere in the world. And I would really like to think about what are the limitations, how are the collaborations, what are the values which are attached to possibilities of change, what are the convictions and passions which move us as values beyond the ones of the market, and what is circulating and how are we informing ourselves through that circulation. Yeah? So these are kind of more ideas which I think people, when they get to a work, and I think John O'Comfort is a fantastic example of a piece of work that you addresses so many of the notions of not only our fears, but a global fear. And how do we actually move from seeing it to taking it on board and allowing it to transform our ideas of the world, which is, I think, part of the story that dissolves so easily back into the sort of darkness, which is the world at the moment.
Okay. I don't know if we can talk about this kind of sceneries of the end of the world, or that everything is super bad and that we have to react to these problems within the arts. I think that this is not something art can do. Because what art can do is put things in question, criticize relations, forms like structures within we can think about problems. I don't think art can give solutions to problems, and that therefore it is of course very complicated to see. I can understand the conflict you have, that we are there and we have to struggle with these contradictions of this incredible luxury things, and on the other side we have like this the ending of the world. So. What I think is what we have to find out, or is that I would like to refer to this term of Walter Benjamin, the exhibition value, because what Benjamin did is that he sets the exhibition value against the cult value, so the ritual that the art production is bound to that, this ritual understanding of art production. And the exhibition value, he thought, is that it is a value which is pushing away the cult value because of question of technology and new media, etc. So maybe we would see this conflict between exhibition value and cult value maybe different, as we would differentiate it a little bit more than Benjamin was able to do it when he has written this text. But what I can see is this that this exhibition value is maybe this field where we have the possibility for negotiations. And what we have to criticize are the conditions of production, for instance. And therefore, I would be also very critical about the conditions we are involved in, like the question what kind of relation we do have to the market. Are we depending from the market? And so we are here within the Biennale, and this is what Shaheen mentioned, is also that we are depending on sponsorships, etc. They are controlling which kind of work is exhibited here. Are we servicing this idea of the market? So this is, I don't want to push to criticize the market too much, because we are involved in the system, and we also have to clear up the relations. But again and again, we have to put things in question, and we also have to make decisions in which way we are acting and dealing. And it's a decision to say, okay, I'm inviting 200 artists, and I can't pay for the travel costs and production costs. This is a decision, and I can also make another decision where I can say, okay, I take the responsibility and I create conditions where you can pay for production, where you can respect artists, etc. So in this field, I think we have to reflect our own acting all the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can continue here, because I think the reference to the exhibition here in this context is so, I mean, we have to address that in one way or another. And the symbolic center is Marx, and that is the main feature, how the exhibition is selling itself in a certain way. And so, of course, there is this question, how does this work in a sense, also in terms of, in terms of Marxian theories in itself about value, but also in terms of Oku's own exhibition history compared to the Documenta 13 years ago. Is this a new universalist narrative which is introduced here, or is this, how is capital and, the problem of globalized post-colonial condition of the art world, is there a connection in one way or another? And how does the exhibition value function in between of that? Yeah, what does the exhibition precisely do? Yeah, is it part of a critique of market value out there? The market is always somewhere else and not here, or is it a performance of that? If even as a performance in Isaac Julian's case, yeah. But what is the? How can we address that? Is this a spectacularized version of Marx we are focusing here? Yeah, or is there still a possibility of a critical potential in that? In both terms of what the basic elements in Marxian value critique as a critique of pure abstract the value form of use value and exchange value and so on and so forth, or in terms of the social social aspect of any value. Yeah, and I think that every value is a position in class struggle. That's so obvious. So how does this work in this in this context? How is the relationship to conditions for artists, but also for laborers and things like that? I think this is crucially important to estimate and to talk about value in terms of that exhibition at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mrs. Graw, and then we're going to open the question, give you the possibility to ask questions, please.
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to also reply to what Mr. Bast said. I think that, I understand this longing for impact, but I think that, art's effects can't be measured in this way, and art in a way has nothing to do with politics with a capital P. The politicity of art is a very specific one. So I also was a little bit wondering whether I would share into this kind of alarmist.
But also trade and economics, they also say they don't have to do nothing with politics. And they do.
No, but it's a specific, I think to expect from art to solve the Libya problem is it's just like, and I also wonder about the kind of alarmist gesture of kind of implying that things are so bad. I think it's more productive to look and analyze the conditions and the way in which they have precisely changed. And I think the change that we are talking about occurred and started to occur basically in the late 1990s of what I call a structural change of the art world, where a former small, mostly Western universe turned into a global industry. And what, you know, and this is also having something to do with a more general economical change, which is the shift from an industrial capitalism to a financial capitalism, which extracts its value, you know, more and more with our kind of lives. So I think these kind of, to analyze these relationships is the task of a kind of criticism of my understanding. And I also think it's important, I think we have the possibility to question the value of market value, you know, and that's, we are implicated in the market. The biennial belongs to what I like to call the market of knowledge. It's a segment of the art market. It's not the auction sphere directly, but it's also a market sphere. We are implicated only if by sitting here and producing, you know, kind of thoughts and knowledge and symbolic meaning, but we have the possibilities to raise doubts. We have the possibility to say, okay, on the one hand, there's a Marx reading here. On the other hand, and this has been hinted to already by other speakers, the conditions of productions have not changed at all. Artists are not paid for their trips. The production costs are paid by gallerists. What does that mean? It means that those artists who don't have such a commercial system behind them won't be invited, because who will pay for their production costs and for their hotel? I think these are, you know, and then to compare that decision, and it is a decision, a curatorial decision, to operate in this way, and to then think about what does that mean, you know, if you have this very strong emphasis on an analysis of capitalist productions, which is what Marx provided. Why don't you start with your own conditions of production, which apparently is not happening, or maybe, I don't know, but this is, for instance, something to, which would be interesting to find out, and I think that, you know, and also I also don't think that art is on a kind of more popular level, that it's only about its economic worth and that only its market value is discussed. I think that's a bit reductivist to say that, or reductionist rather, verkürzt. I would rather say that, you know, the reason as to why the visual arts in particular has become so popular is manifold. It has to do with the artist, you know, serving as a kind of ideal type of the new entrepreneur, the creative entrepreneur. Creativity has become a kind of virtue in the economic sphere as well. So therefore, artists play a different role. I think all these connections have to be analyzed.
Direct way into the trap of the neoliberalism.
No, this kind of analysis, but we first have to understand what is actually happening. And provide a social analysis, which is difficult enough.
Of course, you have to understand, but you cannot just stop in analysis. If you just reduce the role of an artist, or the same would be of a scientist. We all talk about the crisis of humanities. If we reduce ourselves in analyzing things, we are entering the trap of neoliberalism. That's my point.
So what do you think? We should do the revolution now? I mean, I'm there. I'll be there. No problem.
Okay, let's take that for granted. Let's take that for granted. Let's take that for granted. And
it's all about intention.
Yes. But I promised the audience to give the possibility to ask questions, and this is the moment now, because I promised to do it 20 minutes before. So I take 3 questions now. I collect 3 questions, and I didn't forget you, Rene. I have you in my mind. Yes.
Very simple, quick question. I share the doubts about the word impact. I think in this context it would be interesting to talk about power, but not with an uppercase, but with a lowercase p, more in the sense of potentia. How is it that we can understand something about the power that we have? Marx, or the Marxist or the leftist history offers there one striking example: the strike, the moment when the workers are not working. Then they realize not only how the system is organized, but they also realize that they actually have a power, that they're the ones who are creating all the richness and all the so-called values in this context. So wouldn't it be an option, rather than adding one critical and one political work after the other to this system, wouldn't it be an option not to do this?
Okay.
Or at least to discuss what would it mean not to do this. And here I don't mean the art strike of Gustav Metzger or
Okay.
so on and so forth.
Okay. Second question.
I want to ask if art is only about analyzing, only about discussing, then what about, for example, with Augusto Boal or Antanas Mokas, both politicians who used art also as a strategy to not only for legislative measures, but also for really having a strong impact on civic morality, and also using it for civic education. And also, what about the role of arts in education in general, also in schools?
Okay. Thank you for this question. Third question. No third question? Okay, answers. Who wants to start?
It's like a TV game show.
Yes. I give you an award at the end. Okay, who wants to start?
Yeah.
Yep. Helmut, Rene.
Yeah, well, I mean,
ahead.
I think that interesting questions. Thank you. I wanted to just this is kind of like a continuation of what was already started, and also I think maybe it's a way to think about what Florian was mentioning about what would it mean not to. I don't know if I get the rest of it. What not to? What? If it's more like thinking about, you said not a strike, but I think what I'm thinking, and this is what it generates for me, what you asked, and then the other question had to do with civic and also with art education or education. I think that some of the people that I've been in conversation with over some time now, and who are international, I would say, not just from the United States, but in terms of a discussion around the concept called the undercommons. And this is something that's being enacted and also continuing to be discussed. But I wanted to just actually mention something from one of the people. His name is Howard Chen, and he's an independent curator, but also he's producing sound and making different interventions of different kinds, and also in education as well, which is where we're both working. He sent me a message just before leaving based on the topic, because he had been developing something called GQ, which is called Juicing the Equilibrium. It was like a kind of attempt to try to raise questions about the economy, about art, about what kinds of relations can take place right now. And he said, quote, "In the context of today's post-critique and techno-curatorial positivistic regime, this conversation and also on value seem like an island unto itself in a sea of art practices propelled by multiplicity of imperative to make art. I am surprised and slightly embarrassed by how intense we got with this GQ line of questioning." And this is like from 2009 to for a few years of trying to interview people like Luke Boltanski, to try to be in conversation with people about these ideas and to also think about it in relationship to artists as well as institutions. GQ line of questioning, and in retrospect, it looks like a document of deprogramming our training and formation within art. In the end, I guess the horizon for this research we did is that there are many valuations that can be considered critical, unquote, if that is one of the goals in making art, smiley face. So, I mean, I think that these questions about, how do we even perceive of what's being described as art, and also from the different perspectives. I think, the idea of like solving problems and all of that, this is a very tedious, I would say, line to take. And so I just throw that back.
Thank you, Rene. Mr. Draxler, and then?
I also thank you, Florian. I think this is a crucial question. If we come to the conclusion that we always already have participated in the whole game and that there is no whatever exit. But the question is tricky insofar as the strike as a model is of course related to factory system in a certain way, that there are certain circumstances within strike makes sense. Yeah. So the debate we have in Germany now about the value of the strike of the no? What is it? Yeah. Okay. It's showing that. Yeah. What is the social value and how can we address that kind of, if the Negri is right and the whole society has become a factory, then there is no point, when there is total immanence to capital and there is no way of having a position to strike that, because every position, and in a similar way, all the discussions of values of passivity and doing nothing, yeah, and from Agamben and so many others, they have this problem that they're already as speech acts, more or less, we're all taking part. Yeah, it's always an active, proposition, yeah, not to do anything, and that's why there are internal contradictions in that. But that doesn't make them completely, devoid of value. Yeah, I think they are of course necessary as precisely the questions we cannot answer in a certain way. How do, and that's what I like, in a way, in an exhibition like that, to go into that and to perform, to overperform Marx in a way. Yeah. So if it would be a more or less classical reading, just then it would not have any kind of, or almost not any kind of aesthetic dimension. Then it would be maybe more problematic, as in this case, yeah, when it is overperformed, overdetermined in a certain way, as something which is a spectacle, yeah, and has long maybe become a spectacle.
So what is the answer to the question?
The answer to the question is just go on, find the point of doing nothing,
and
but don't trust.
Yeah, I didn't forget. Yes. And then we had a second question, which I found was very interesting and important. So, Mrs. Graw,
but I need to say something about the strike question as well, because it kind of preoccupies me more, because it reminds me, theorists also like Virno, who in the last chapter of the Grammar of the Multitude advocates for flight or exodus, if I remember correctly. But in the art, in the art field, we have a kind of particular tradition with strike, and I'm thinking, immediately of Lilo Zano's famous strike piece from '69, where she decided that she'll stop to go uptown to go to openings, and she also won't talk to any Art World members for a certain amount of time. And of course this work is, epistemologically really interesting for that moment, but, it is precisely its kind of strike aura which contributed to its status today as a legendary, symbolically very valuable work. And the same is true for the I prefer not to Bartleby attitude, which had a certain popularity amongst artists in the 90s, up to Josef Strauss' so-called non-productive attitude, which he claimed for Cologne in the early 90s, where no objects were produced, but the way the artist conducted herself, her attitude became the production. So one refused production in the narrow sense of the term and produced oneself. But this, again, turned out to be rather dubious, because then it was the artist who was on the line, being valuable with all her life, night, day, in the bar, and so on. So all these strike propositions, first of all, end up being valuable, and they have their downside, and you have to be able to afford it. And that is true for the art milieu as well. You have to have a certain possibility to be in the position to say this symbolic no, and symbolic is underlined here. Yeah.
Okay, we had this question of the young lady saying that because I understood you like this, that you were referring to Rector Bast, who would say, is there any other space for art in our society than for making money? So your question was, what is the role of art in education? Where is art education in schools? And can we use art for a political strategy, right? Okay, is there any answer to this question?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe a lot of important arguments came up concerning this question: if we can, what we can do, or if we can do something, or if we should not do something. So I like the word labor in this in this discussion, because you know, through labor, through our labor, we can like develop certain ideas or certain concepts or whatever. We can work on that. I mean, I think it's interesting when we look at our own table. You know, Rene as an artist, or Isabelle as a critic, or also Helmut as an art historian and critic and stuff like that. So me as a curator. So everybody is talking with a certain interest, and we are acting also in certain interests. And I think this we have to question ourselves in that what we're doing, and but we also have to cultivate this kind of production or labor, and therefore it is important to criticize ourselves, but not as a concept which has an approach of truth or something like this. It can function in a certain situation, in a certain discussion, but not for the whole thing. And so that's why we should not think about concepts which can work all over the world. Therefore, I would also think that it's important, because also when we're talking about the Biennale, for instance, it's also important when we say, okay, we have these nation pavilions and stuff like that, and we're saying, yes, we have to come over that. So that's of course true, because it's ridiculous in a way in thinking about like these little houses representing a nation. But at the same time, I think it's also important that we read this kind of pavilions as work formations, yeah? That also the nation building is standing for a kind of production in a certain region. And these regions are like working fields or fields of negotiation, and therefore I think they are important so that we can develop arguments. And yes, in this way, I also would understand the question of education, because the question of education is, of course, a question where we say, how can we work on this kind of inclusion, exclusion? How can we get aware of contents, of ideas, concepts, artists to have, or theorists to have, or critics to have? Yeah.
Did this answer your question?
Could I say something? I just want to say something in relationship to your question a little bit more directly, and also, I mean, just to reflect a little bit. Eva was mentioning about us, you know, taking on these different positions, like critic or whatever. But I mean, I just want to complicate matters a little bit, because life is more complicated in the fact that we have multiple jobs. I'm a professor at MIT, and so that's a particular kind of labor. For art, culture, and technology. That's the program. I would say that, you know, in terms of what you are asking, I think it's an interesting question. And maybe you could restate it. But, I mean, I think that all spaces are complicated. And especially in terms of trying to have a space to be able to develop work as an artist. And also to think about, well, what kind of space is it that you are going to create? Because it will be up to you to create it. Nothing is going to be just handed to you. I can definitely say that after having worked with a number of different educational institutions. It is always an effort to try to find space and create it, especially as an artist. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of instances where this is purported, that there can be something civic that happens, but I think that it always has to be something generated from the person who's involved in doing it.
A person, not institutions.
What's that?
I said a person. You would say you would bring it back to the person and not to institutions.
I would say that all institutions are going to be institutional. Okay. Like as in corporate.
Okay. Okay. Is this answering your question? Yes, kind of. Okay. So, Shaheen, I wanted to ask you if there is an answer from your side to the young lady's question.
I'm not quite sure specifically to the question, but Spivak once said about how she's affected personally as well as politically when she encounters or tries to make decisions. And she said, everything is both medicine and poison in itself. And in that, I think that ambivalence, there is a great value in also doubting oneself as we approach exhibitions, texts, encounters such as this. What I take away from this exhibition here is a kind of essence of Marxism and Marx, which has always been very prevalent and the art world has been very partial to it, is part of its breeding ground in a sense. And in a sense, what will happen to a certain extent, it is there to encourage others to possibly think about its place in the discourse, in its history, of art history. Will it become more substantial? Will the essence become more relational? Are some of the questions which are being asked here. But also to a certain extent, it does affect us and also bereaves us because it's something which is expected and in a sense is central to the way that art education is formulated around certain left politics and ideas about where meaning can be construed. But there is a kind of mystical character of Marx which has always been part of the art world. And I think this in a sense makes it much more theatrical in that sense, brings it more central. And I'm not sure how we will react to it, but the reaction so far that I've gleaned from various people has not been medicinal and more poisonous.
Okay. It seems like, yeah, it sounded like we came to the end of this discussion. Shaheen, you have to say amen, then we go. No, thank you so much for all your inputs and your patience, and thank you so much for your contributions. Even though you didn't say a word, you contributed something. Thank you for your contributions on the panel, and for coming, and for resisting, and for not agreeing sometimes and going into a kind of really valuable discussion. But I think that Rector Bast wants to have the last word on this panel, so I give it to him.
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming, and especially thank you for participating and discussing with me. And just remember, as a final thought for you, remember on a sentence Walter Benjamin wrote a long time ago, and in this sentence he draw the attention on great philosophers, economists of the age of Enlightenment, and he wrote. It's a long time ago, something like that, I don't remember it exactly. It's a long time ago when great men like David Hume or Kant signed their letters to the emperors of their days with "your humble servant." And at the same time, they pulled away the ground beneath the feet of these emperors. And my question is, where are the people, not only in the arts, but also in the sciences? And I don't mean the natural sciences. They are doing it right now. In the humanities, where are the people, the men and the women, who are pulling away the ground beneath some people who should lose ground for society which is much more lively. Thank you.